Hey, how's it going? um, so here we are, and we have reached another milestone. That is to say that in this episode of, oh, by the way, hello, this is Harry Potter Abridged. If you didn't know how to read but you were good at clicking, well then good for you. Thanks for coming along. This is the first episode of our third book, our third novel in the series, which is entitled Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. And so we are on chapter 1 of that. And so here we are. Third book. I know many of you probably didn't think that I'd make it this far, and I can say that I at some point agreed with you. However, recently I have well, you know, if you've been around, you know. If you don't, then well, I've been on a roll. And so we're gonna continue this for as long as it's fun. Anyway, and so chapter 1 in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban is entitled Owl Post. And this is it's not a terribly long chapter, and it's it's basically it's a setup chapter. It's because we've discussed this before. Rowling likes to do this thing where she, at various points at the beginning of each book, sort of, especially in the earlier ones, gives us sort of the memory refresher of, like, this is who the main characters are, this is their relation to Harry, hell, even this is who Harry is, and then just like kind of connecting us back to the end of the previous book. I mean, and being that it again was originally written for a younger audience, but also with adults somewhat in mind, but still with the primary audience being the people who were, at least when it was originally out, like the people who are Harry's age, and even later. I mean, a lot of times parents do that with their kids. They actually give them like the first one when they're 11 and like go on like that. So, if it's been a year since you've read the previous book, and you didn't do that like thing where you reread it right before you read the next one, then this is useful. But the point being is that there's not a ton of new information provided in this one, but we do get a birthday, an overnight. That seems to happen a lot with Harry. We get his birthday not on his birthday, like the day that he wakes up on his birthday, but usually like that night that's leading into the technical midnight, it's now your birthday at midnight kind of situation. It happens to him in the first book where he's awake and he's counting down the minutes and then the seconds right before Hagrid knocks on the door as he turns 11. And I don't remember what is it. Is that Dobby's warning and the worst birthday? Yeah, that's. So there's stuff that happens on his actual birthday there, but whatever. I'm just saying we it seems like we get at least, okay. Watch, it's going to end up being 2 out of 7, and not just because I've said that, but I can remember these two right now. Anyway, so that's what it is. But even though that hasn't been mentioned yet, but anyway, so we get. Let's see, what do we get? We get the usual, I'll say usual, but early on, more usual reference to Harry being an unusual boy, and we see that, he hates the summer holidays, and of course we know why, because the Dursleys, and so he's actually trying to do homework over the holidays, which is always kind of a crazy idea to me. Like, you can actually I mean, I guess it makes more sense in the context of a school like Hogwarts, where you know you're going to have like the same, or most of the time you're going to have the same professors the following year, so they can follow up with you. But like, I seem to remember thinking that there was like occasionally stuff that was supposed to be like done or read over the course of a summer when I was growing, and I don't remember ever doing anything actually, or ever really being checked on it that I can recall. Of course, then again, I may have blocked that out and just don't remember, but that's neither here nor there. Right, and and of course it's mentioned, just in case we had somehow picked this book up without knowing about it, that Harry also happened to be a wizard. And I get it; she's sort of being funny, but still. Um, and it's nearly midnight. And Harry's in bed, but he's not in bed for sleeping. He's in bed studying. He's laying like on his stomach, or whatever, and he's got like the street sheets pulled up over him, and I'm pretty sure. It's hard for me to remember now, but I just remember that the first time I saw the word torch used, and it might have been that I didn't see it. It might have been that I heard it. I can't remember, or maybe it was in the American version. I doubt it. Anyway, I was like, how the fuck is he under the sheet with a torch in his hand? Like, it must be really, like, I don't, this doesn't make sense to me. And then I eventually, like, realized that that was the word for flashlight. And I was like, oh, right, I knew that. And so I don't remember, like I said, if it was in the early readings, like if I was confused, or if it said flashlight in the American editions and torch only in the British ones, which means I wouldn't have encountered it until the audiobooks. But it's too far back to remember now. But I just remember that whenever I did encounter it, whenever that was, I was confused because I couldn't understand how he wasn't burning the sheets. Or setting the whole house on fire, for that matter. Anyway, I was like, it's like a mini magic torch. Like, I was just like trying to like make it make sense because everything else in the story made sense. It just didn't occur to me to even like think of it being a word for something else. Um, yep, true story. Anyway, he happens to be reading from A History of Magic by Batilda Bagshot, which is corrected from I think that when it's mentioned in like the very first book, there's like an incorrect author. It's like a Dalbert Waffling or some shit like that. Anyway, I don't know if that was corrected in the print edition. I think I always hear it when I'm listening to the audiobook, and I'm like, no, that's wrong. It's Batilda Bagshot. But anyway, dun, 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 dun. And I don't know why, but right now in this moment is the first time that I've ever thought about the fact that her last name is also the name of where Frodo lives in the Lord of the Rings universe, and Bilbo, Bagshot Row. Anyway, and so Harry's writing an essay about witch burning in the 14th century. And we do get like a little like silly bit of history about like witches and wizards being captured and supposedly burned during medieval times, and how they used a flame freezing charm to keep the fire from actually hurting them. But then I also think, like, I mean, don't get me wrong. Obviously, if a witch or wizard has any skill and they choose to use it, they could pretty much keep a muggle from doing much to them. But I also think, like, what if they got ganged up on and like somebody took their wand? They couldn't stop themselves from being burned then necessarily, could? I mean, again, there's the argument that everybody who's a witch or wizard has magic in them, and in theory they might be able to channel it. I mean, obviously, this book that we're in, the very next chapter, involves Harry using a certain type of magic that he doesn't even know he's doing without a wand. So I suppose it's possible that these people could have protected themselves anyway, in theory, in this universe. But still, like a lot of them learn how to use magic with a wand. So I'm like, they make it seem like in this bit that she's reading, I mean, that Harry is reading out of the Bathilda Bagshot History of Magic book, it makes it seem like it was no big deal. Like, I don't know, maybe they were able to like keep their wands concealed in some kind of way, or I don't know. I just would think that if somebody would got captured to the point where they were able to be tied to a stake and supposedly burned, that other violent harm might have come to them and caused them to either lose some of their abilities or to lose their wand, or who knows. It also says that that most of the time the medieval people didn't actually catch real witches or wizards, which of course is unfortunate because those people actually did probably burn to death. And so that's horrible because they weren't even. I mean, first of all, it shouldn't have been an offense, but it's also like, right. Anyway, and obviously there's like a bit of a parallel here between, well, I guess you could say being a wizard could be compared to several types of places in actual society. And to avoid like trying to single one out and then missing some others or whatever, we'll just say any identity that a human might have as part of a group that is a group that's persecuted in any way or looked down upon in any way, or whatever. It just so happens that because the magic is involved in this universe, they're able to do things like create a statute of secrecy and like do memory charms on people who see things and like basically create a full separation. So it's not even like the solution is a truly harmonious one. I mean, granted, they are a smaller percentage of the population, as sometimes people who are persecuted are. But they are like at least sort of have the option of pulling away and becoming like their own society, which they do and have done for. I forgot when they say the statute of secrecy was implemented, but they say that, or at least Hagrid tells Harry in the first book that that's because people will be wanting magic solutions to their problems, but really I think it's because people are scared of things that they don't understand. A lot of people are anyway. Some people are enthralled by and enchanted by these things, but many people are scared and resist this sort of thing. So I would say that it's likely that that's the real reason why. And I'm sure there's probably more information like on. I did not plan this tangent, but if I had, I would have done some research on the topic. But again, this is a short chapter, so it's worth a few tangents here and there. Let's see. Anyway, right. The flame freezing charm, and we hear about Wendelin the Weird, who was a witch of medieval times who enjoyed being burnt so much that she allowed herself to be captured no fewer than 47 times in various disguises. Lots of fun that Wendelin the Weird had. She really knew how to liven up a party. Right. And so Harry is writing, and he's, there are some some funny choices that Rowling made when it comes to like what. Since there's in the wizarding world, like since they use magic for everything that Muggles use technology for, there's a lot of things about their culture that sort of like harkens back to like an older time. Most of it's not medieval, although there are castles, so there's that. But a lot of it seems to be more like Victorian. Maybe sadly, I'm not up enough on my English history to know for sure. Jorge, I'm sure, or maybe a few other folks who are from that lovely homeland of my ancestors. Perhaps you could give us a little more enlightenment into what eras of English history Rowling borrows from to create the Wizarding World. Because, for example, using parchment instead of paper and using a quill and an ink bottle is obviously a very dated practice. And I know that that's probably not medieval. That's probably a little later, right? Again, I'm not positive. But nonetheless, it's extremely dated, even for the, what this is like 1992 or something by this point in the book, or maybe thereabouts. Anyway, it's still an extremely dated practice. But it's like, it creates like, I mean, I think it was smart for her to do things like this. Like, some people are like, it doesn't make any sense. They could, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, but it's like she creates an atmosphere by having, and there's probably some logical reasons that she worked out too that some people haven't thought about, that I haven't thought about even myself. Most people probably haven't thought about as to why perhaps things stayed a certain way. Again, because they weren't integrated with Muggles, they weren't given like access to certain technologies that maybe they would have taken advantage of. I think maybe that's probably the easiest way to explain it. But regardless of what the reasoning is, even though I do think that reasoning is can be useful and nice to have to add to the logic of the universe, but nonetheless, like, it helps to kind of create the separateness of the world from the Muggle world. Because, I mean, if they all had like a lot of technological things and also could do magic, it wouldn't make it as separate feeling. It would be like, oh, they're just like magicians, or not magicians, exactly, wizards and witches amongst us. Instead, it's like, no, we do our own thing, we keep to ourselves, and therefore our systems have evolved in their own sort of separate way. You could almost look at how the United States started to change and evolve, whatever, after the breakaway from the British Empire. Like, at one point we spoke and dressed like them, and eventually America. So here we are. Anyway, not exactly a perfect parallel, but but in a way, it's like there was a fork in the road there. And after the Statute of Secrecy, all right, I'm repeating myself now. Let's go. Right, so that was all just because of the quill and the ink. Right. Dun, 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 dun. And he's having to, like, he's doing this, like, I mean, obviously he's closed up in his room, so it's not like he's readily able to be seen, but he's also under the covers because he wants to be able to, like, flick the flashlight off. He's not supposed to be, we're at the point in the story still where he's not supposed to be doing anything relating to the Wizarding World while he's under the Dursleys' roof. They're just, like, mad about it. So, he can't openly do schoolwork. He's having to hide it, and he's got to make sure he doesn't drip ink on the sheets, which is kind of a random thing to have to worry about, but it is what it is. Although I will say, like, it seems like it wouldn't have hurt while he was in the Muggle world to, like, just bust out an ink pen there, because they're there. At Hogwarts, it's sort of different, but I mean, ink on a parchment is ink on a parchment, right? Whatever puts it there is, anyway, whatever. Right, and then we're reminded of who the Dursleys are, named all again, and they're being the reason why Harry doesn't like his summer holidays. And it's mentioned that they have a very medieval attitude towards magic, so we get a tie-in to the the school material there. And Harry's parents are never mentioned. We hear about the way that they've treated him, and like how they've tried to squash the magic out of him, and then and now that they live in terror of anyone ever finding out where he actually goes to school, and So they lock away his stuff when he comes home right now. He used to live in the cupboard under the stairs. Now they lock his shit in there. So that, obviously created a bad situation, but especially because, again, at least it's mentioned here, he has homework for the summer. I guess maybe they do every summer, but it doesn't seem like it gets mentioned every time. But maybe, it doesn't need to be, I don't suppose, either. So anyway, at this point it matters because he can't get to his stuff, so that's why it gets brought up. And it's mentioned specifically that he has an essay for Snape to do, and he knows that that he needs to do that because it would be problematic for him if he didn't show up with it. So early on in the holidays, like the first week, he's able to sneak into the hallway there while the Dursleys are outside admiring Uncle Vernon's new company car. And he picks the lock and gets... And I'm wondering... Because I know later he gets like a knife from Sirius that can pick a lock, and also there's a point in time, I think... Was it in the previous? I always get confused. Yeah. It was in the previous book. Right. When with the introduction of the flying car, one of the Weasley twins picks the lock in Harry's bedroom. I'm just wondering, like, did they I can't remember now. Did they teach him how to pick locks? Anyway, point being is that Harry creeps into the downstairs hallway and picks the lock on the cupboard under the stairs and gets his books, and has been hiding them in the floorboard in his room that he keeps stuff under. Right. So. Oh, right, and we find out that the Dursleys are already kind of pissed at him because in the very beginning of the holidays, Ron tried to do the telephone call thing, and it went abysmally. And it's pretty funny because not only does Ron not understand how telephones work, where you can speak at a normal volume and people can listen to you, and both people can speak at normal volumes, but so he starts off yelling, and of course Vernon loses his shit, and so he yells back. So there's no indication to Ron that you're not supposed to yell, so he yells the next part of his thing. So he's asking to talk to Harry, and Vernon's like, "Who is this?" He's yelling back at him, and so Ron yells back his name and says that he's a friend of Harry's from school, and and Vernon just yells back at him again. He tells him that there's no Harry Potter there, and to never call again, and to stay away from his family, and all of that kind of shit. And so then he, loses it with Harry. Of course, it's not like Harry could have stopped him from calling. But he's saying Harry should have never given him the number. And Harry's regretting that that's how it went, and he wished that Hermione had called first because she was raised by Muggles and knew exactly how to use a telephone. Although it says that Hermione would have probably had the sense not to mention that she went to school with Harry. But what would she have said? Sure, she could have been more polite on the phone, and Hermione's actually pretty good at coming up with last minute lies, or convincing lies, or whatever. She's very clever, but what? They already know that the only people Harry knows are from that world anyway. It's either that or the neighborhood, which really, for the most part, only includes Mrs. Figg. So I just wonder, I'm what does he think? What does Harry think that Hermione would have been able to say that would have... it wouldn't have been a shouting match, that's for sure, because she wouldn't have started the phone call with shouting, but yeah. Anyway... So after that, Harry hadn't heard from anybody, and it's been 5 weeks, and again, at this age, 5 weeks is a long time not to hear from your friends at all. Although it's weird because even though Harry swore that he wouldn't use Hedwig to send letters, that he's able to send Hedwig out, no, not send, but let her out now to feed and stuff at night. But I'm like, how would they even know if he used her to communicate with people? I mean, they're not gonna, especially if he. Well, I don't know. Maybe they might see her flying in with a letter or something. I don't know. It just. Anyway, but he doesn't, I guess. So he, like I said, he hasn't heard from anybody. So Harry's like, it's getting late, and he's like, let's see, what was. Anyway, he decides he's gonna finish his essay tomorrow. He's written his bit about Wendell and the Weird already. So he puts all the stuff down on the floorboard, and it's now 1 a.m., and Harry's like, oh shit, bro. I've been like 13 for a whole hour. And so, I would have mentioned that another one of the unusual qualities about Harry is that he doesn't usually look forward to his birthday, or at least he never has, because he grew up in a house where everybody hated him, and never really acknowledged his birthday. So he's never gotten a card. He's never gotten a cake. He's never had any of that shit. So, and he walks over to the window, and he opens it, and he leans out into the cool night air, and he's hanging out, and he's hoping Hedwig will come back soon, because, he's pretty much all alone there without her. And she's been gone for, let's see, 2 nights now, but he's not worried. She does this because, she's an owl. But, he would like for her to come back. So anyway, and we get a mention of Harry's build. I don't remember why right now. Oh, because he's grown a little bit, even though he's still rather small and skinny for his age. We get a description of his untidy hair, because we always do. We get the bright green eyes, the glasses, and then the scar shaped like a bolt of lightning. And of course, it's mentioned that the scar is the most of the unusual things. So we're rounding out the unusual list. That the scar is the most extraordinary, unusual thing of them all. And so we get more exposition about refreshers about that they lied and told the Dursleys had lied and told Harry that his parents had died in a car crash. So that's where he thought he got the scar from. But he finds out, of course, that they were murdered by Voldemort. How he survived with the scar. We're really getting the whole fucking thing. Voldemort, barely alive, fled. Harry has met him since. We know this. Harry's lucky to even have reached his 13th birthday, we are reminded. He's looking for Hedwig. And as he's staring out there, thinking about her coming back with like a mouse or something in her beak, he suddenly starts to see something very strange and lopsided that seems to be flying towards the house. And he's confused about what it is, which is understandable. And he has like a fleeting moment of like, oh shit, should I close the window? Like, what the fuck? And then it passes by a light, and he realizes that it's not a single being after all, that it's 3 owls and some packages and stuff. And so when he realizes that, he jumps aside, and they all land with a soft flump on Harry's bed. And we figure out who the owls are one by one. The first one is a large and gray one, who happens to also be very old. And that is Errol, who is the Weasley's family owl. And of course, just to emphasize that the Weasleys are not as well off, they have to have an old and not decrepit, but nearly owl that's gray. I'd forgotten that he was large, but it says that. So I guess at one point, sometime in the fairly distant past, Errol was like a great owl, probably. Da, da, da. So he gets that parcel first, the one tied to Errol, and carries him over to Hedwig's cage. Errol does the owl equivalent of letting you know that he's happy and thankful, and drinks some water. And then we get Hedwig, who is his large snowy owl, and she's carrying a parcel too. She looks very pleased with herself, however owls manage to do this. And so, all right, and so Hedwig goes to join Errol in the cage, and then there's a third owl, which he doesn't recognize, but it's a handsome tawny owl. But he knows where it's from because it, in addition to carrying a parcel, is also carrying a Hogwarts envelope. And so Harry relieves this owl of its post, and it ruffles its feathers importantly and takes off back out into the night. Duty accomplished. Well done, Tawny. And so Harry gets to open his packages. And it's funny because like we just got the mention of how he hadn't heard from anybody, so of course now he's going to hear from everybody. And so he opens the package from Errol, which of course is from Ron. And so, like, this is all, like, firsts for him, and I forget, because Dobby had taken all of his mail the previous year, and I do think it's on his birthday that he gets everything back. And so they're probably, maybe they're work hard, surely. Anyway, it says here that he's getting his first ever birthday card, so we'll just pretend like that's the case. Maybe it is. I can't remember the details now before, but surely they sent stuff for him. And so he opens the envelope first instead of the package because he's a nice guy, and there's a letter and a newspaper clipping, and he's like, huh. And so he picks that up, and it reads an article about how Mr. Weasley won a Daily Prophet grand prize galleon draw. So they won like where is it? Damn it, how did I miss it? Hang on. I thought it was in the article. Maybe it's in Ron's letter. Anyway, so it's mentioned here that the Weasleys are going to spend their unexpected gold on a trip to Egypt to visit Bill for a month. And I gotta say, like, for a family so full of children and so short on funds for that many children, which, by the way, we always hear about how they're like basically poor, but I mean, like, when you've got that many fucking kids, like, you could actually be making decent money and only seem poor because you've got that many children to support. So yeah. Anyway, but I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, a trip like this is a fantastic thing to do as a family. I'm not saying that it's not. I'm just saying that if they're that short, like, maybe it would have been better to just, you know, buy them all like a nice little gift or something useful for their lives or whatever, and then put the rest of that shit in the old Gringotts there. But whatever. I mean, who am I to judge? I'm horribly spendthrifty at times. So, but I don't have children to support either. But whatever. I mean, it makes for a fun story, and it also apparently probably a really good picture. I'm sure there was a version in the movie too, but I haven't watched that yet. The whole family there in Egypt, and Harry looks at the picture and it makes him smile because these are all these people he cares about, and they're all together, waving up out of him from the picture on the paper, and they're standing in front of a large pyramid to just make it nice and Egypty. And they're all described, and how that even though they're in black and white, Harry knows that they all have flaming red hair. And it's mentioned that Ron has his pet Scabbers on his shoulder and his arm around his little sister Jenny. Oh, Ronnie. But Harry does also say that he can't think of anyone who deserved to win a large pile of gold more than the Weasleys, and that is absolutely true because they are great people. It says were very nice but extremely poor, and again, extremely poor I think is not accurate, but they're just they do have to struggle again because the Weasleys clearly didn't use birth control for a long time of any kind. Maybe there probably isn't even, and see, this is another one of those weird things that obviously doesn't get touched on because of the type of story it is, but I'm like, because of the way that the wizarding world has evolved, like, there probably isn't even like a magical, maybe there's a potion, there probably is a potion that somebody invented to work as like a magical birth control thingy, surely. But anyway, we don't touch on anything anywhere remotely close to that. I mean, we get into other dark and scary stuff, but we don't touch on things like, birth control. Anyway, so Ron writes a letter. Ron's actually she did a good job of just making it seem like that Ron writes exactly how he talks, which I can totally sympathize with because that's how I like to write a lot of times too, especially in messages. He's sorry about the phone call. He's like, I guess I probably shouldn't have shouted. Talks about how cool it is in Egypt. He mentions the ancient Egyptian wizards. And like the curses that are on some of the tombs, and how there was this one tomb that had like mutant skeletons of muggles who'd like broken in and like gotten cursed and like grown extra body parts and shit like that. It is mentioned that Ginny didn't go in there. She was prohibited. 700 galleons, there it is. That's a lot of fucking wizard money. Like, I mean, it's not, Harry's got more than that, but like, I don't know, Harry must have had rich grandparents is all I can figure, because his parents died kind of young. So I don't think that they were the source of all that gold that he got. Well, it was convenient for Rowling to make sure all of Harry's family was dead, and so we don't really hear anything about the grandparents. They were already gone. Anyway. Ron does mention that even though most of the gold is going to be gone on this trip, that's the other thing too. Like, they could have gone for 2 weeks instead of a month. Whatever. Maybe it's entirely plausible that the Weasleys still put like a couple hundred away or something like that, which for them would be a nice, you know, a nice thing to do. But it's also worth noting that they're getting to the point. I mean, they don't have as many children to support now as they did at one point in time either. With Bill and Charlie gone, and Percy is almost gone at this point. And then Fred and George a little bit later. Anyway, whatever. You gotta figure the Weasleys in retirement. That would be a that would be a great sitcom on NBC. Oh my God, the Arthur and Molly in retirement after like empty nested, after raising, what is it, like 6 or 7 kids? Like it's a bunch. Anyway, anyhow, okay, we're gonna leave it alone. But Ron's getting a new wand. That was my point in that last bit. There is that in addition to their trip, they are definitely buying him a new wand. So that whole broken wand nonsense that should have, for all intents and purposes, precluded him from getting to the 3rd year in the first place is going to be replaced. And I don't feel like we ever hear anything about this new wand, but it would have been kind of nice to have found out, the way he talks about his new broom when he gets it in the 5th book, it would have been cool to have gotten it's a it's birch and dragon heartstring or whatever. Whatever. I just want to know. I'm sure that information's available online somewhere, but it would have been kind of cool to have Ron be excited about it and tell Harry. And of course we get the reminder of how his previous wand got broken in the flying car and all that good shit. Anyway, so Ron's like, yeah, we're gonna be back a week before. Let's meet at not Hogsmeade, and fucking Diagon Alley in London. And we find out that Percy has become head boy in the PS from Ron's letter. Okay, so, and Harry sees that Percy has pinned his new badge onto the fez on his neat hair, and his horn-rimmed glasses are mentioned because they always are at some point. And so he gets to Ron's present, which is a pocket sneakoscope, which is basically like a little. It looks like a little spinning top or a dreidel or something like that. That lights up and spins if there's someone untrustworthy around, and and it stands on its point. I'd forgotten about that. I was thinking it laid on its side, then it stood up when it, but no, it stands on its point magically to begin with, and then it starts spinning and lighting up and making noise if there's someone untrustworthy around. Anyway, and Ron explains that Bill was saying that it was rubbish because it it was lighting up at dinner, but he didn't realize that Fred and George had put beetles in his soup. Oh, Fred and George, you guys are too much. And really, why you want to go picking on Bill? But I think they're equal opportunity pranksters, I think is all that really means. So then he got the parcel that Hedwig brought, and there's a letter from Hermione, and she heard about the phone call, which is why she didn't call, and she's in France, and she's learned all kinds of interesting stuff, and she's rewritten her History of Magic essay, and she bets that Ron is learning loads, which of course he is, but not in the way that she would have if she was there. And she mentions the being in London the last week of the holidays also, and ask him if he can make it, which it's funny because they both mention it, and of course, as it will turn out, Harry will, in fact, be there maybe an extra week ahead of that or something. Anyway, blah, 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 blah. And Hermione mentioned Percy in her PS also. And she's like, I bet Percy's really pleased. Ron doesn't seem too happy about it. And always, this actually made me wonder something. Not this little bit about Ron and Percy, but we always hear what Harry gets from Ron and Hermione. I would love if she had worked it in where we found out like what Hermione got Ron for his birthday when it came around. Well, we only really get Ron's birthday mentioned, I think, like once, and it's a very unfortunate one for him in book 5. Anyway. And Hermione gets Harry like a really great gift. It's a broomstick servicing kit, and he's, because he's expecting it to be a book, because it's kind of a big, bulky package, and he just thinks it's like this giant book, but it turns out to be like a nice box that has this, black leather case. Yeah. Anyway, and it's got broomstick servicing kit stamped across it, and he's like, oh, Hermione, you are really too good at this gift giving thing, because she really is. And so the kit has some cool stuff in it. Twig clippers, tail twig clippers, a compass that you can clip onto it for long journeys, and a handbook for do-it-yourself broom care, which comes in a bit of handy later, but not quite enough for Harry, but for different reasons than what it's intended. Anyway, and of course we get mention of Quidditch now, which is a good way because Harry misses it as more. The only thing he misses, how the fuck did she say it? Aside from his friends, the thing that he missed the most. That's the way that's what I'm trying to put across there. I'll just quote sometimes. Is that he misses Quidditch a lot. And it's, and it's a sport, broomsticks, we know how that works. Harry's really good at it, we know that too. These are reminders. Youngest person in a century, every little bit about it from the last 2 books. And his nice Nimbus 2000 racing broom. And then he gets to the last parcel. And of course, it's from Hagrid, because at this point, these are the 3 people that Harry is really connected to in the Wizarding world. Ron, Hermione, and Hagrid. So, and he recognizes the untidy scrawl, which is how Hagrid's writing is described every single time it's referenced. And then his parcel, moves. And it snaps as though it has jaws. And Harry's like, the fuck, Hagrid? And of course he knows Hagrid would never send him anything dangerous on purpose, but as it is mentioned, Hagrid doesn't have a normal person's view of what is dangerous. And, of course, that gives us the chance to mention the giant spider, the Fluffy, the big giant 3-headed dog, and the dragon egg that birthed Norbert, Norbert, eventually named Norberta. Whatever. You know what the fuck I'm trying to say. So he's like, what in the world? He pokes at it and it snaps again. And he's like, oh my God, Hagrid, what in the fuck, man? So he grabs the lamp on his bedside table, ready to knock something out with it. And he pulls the wrapping paper off. And it's a book. And so Harry's like, what the hell? And he sees that it is a book called The Monster Book of Monsters. Now, do we want to? No, I'm not going to get into it yet. I'm going to save it for the Diagon Alley chapter of this book. Yep, we'll save that tangent for that chapter. It's like the next one and the one after. Anyway, and so the book flips onto its edge and scuttles like a crab across his bed, and Harry's like, "Oh, what in the world?" Then it falls off the bed, and shuffles across the room, and Harry's following it stealthily, and Harry's really hoping that that the Dursleys are still asleep, and it gets under his desk, and he reaches for it, and it snaps shut on his hand, and then it runs past him, and before it can get under something else, Harry like throws himself on it and flattens it, somehow not waking anybody up, but Vernon does give a loud grunt in the room next door. And Hedwig and Errol are watching like it's a tennis match. And so Harry like keeps the book like clutched in his arms. He's able to like keep it closed now. Like an alligator. Like it's easier to keep its jaw shut than it is to stop it from shutting in the first place. And so then he pulls out a belt and buckles it around there, and basically he's been able to trap his book from opening its book mouth again. So it shudders, but it's not able to flap and snap, as he puts it. So then he was able to look at Hagrid's card, and so we get Hagrid says he thinks that Harry might find this useful for the next year. He's like, "Won't say no more here. Tell you when I see you." Well, Hagrid voice is not on today. Sorry, guys. Hope the Muggles are treating you right. Or all of them say, "Hope the Muggles are treating you right," which, of course, is always like, may as well be code for, "I know the Muggles suck, but I hope you're dealing with it okay." And Harry's like, he thinks I'm going to need this book this year. Like, what in the world? So he has no idea what to think about that. But nonetheless, he's happy that to get the stuff anyway, because he's never had a birthday like proper, where people like give him cards and presents and stuff. So he puts all the cards up, and he's really, really happy. And so it is. It's like it's a legitimately cheerful chapter. And right now I'm in my progression back through the books listening. I am I don't know if I made it halfway or not, but I'm well into Order of the Phoenix at this point. And I mean, every chapter is dark, even if it doesn't start so. It's like every fucking chapter is just like it's at one point, I remember saying it was my favorite Harry Potter book, and I think maybe it was just where I was in my life at the time, or because it was newer to me, or whatever, but good God. I mean, it is a great story, don't get me wrong, but it's just like, there's so many frustrating factors, and you kind of like feel for Harry and everybody, and it's just, yeah. And there's a lot of anger in that book, too. It's not unwarranted, but it just gets to be a bit much. Anyway, this is not that. So anyway, Harry he's done with the stuff from Hagrid, and he grabs the Hogwarts envelope, which he notices is thicker than usual. And it has his normal letter about the King's Cross and Platform 9 3/4 and the train and all that good old shit. And then it mentions that third years are permitted to visit the village of Hogsmeade at certain weekends, and there's going to be a permission form enclosed, which is part of why it's thicker than usual, the envelope. And Harry's like, oh, fuck. Permission slip, and I live with the fucking Dursleys. So he's like, his little bubble of happiness is kind of burst for the moment, and he's like, man, I really want to go to Hogsmeade. It says he's never set foot there. I have to look at a map. I kind of thought that like when you got off the train at Hogsmeade Station, you had to walk through the village to get to school. But maybe it's on the school side of the village. I don't really know. Anyway, but nonetheless, he's like how's he gonna get like either one of his aunt or uncle to sign this form? And it's now 2:00 in the morning, and so Harry's like, you know what? I'm not gonna worry about that tonight. I did get presents and cards and shit. So anyway, he makes another. He's got like his like prison calendar where he's like counting down the days until he goes back, and so he knocks another day off and lays down. And it's mentioned that back one more time back to the unusual bit, which is the theme of this chapter. It seems. Extremely unusual though he was, at the moment, Harry Potter felt just like everyone else, glad, for the first time in his life, that it was his birthday. Which is fucking tragic, but also awesome. I mean, tragic in a first world problems kind of way, just to be realistic about it. But I mean, he's 13, and this is the first time that he's been happy it's his birthday. That's it's pretty shitty, but it's awesome that he's getting it finally, nonetheless, that he's experiencing that kind of feeling and is happy, and he's got friends for real for the first time in his life now for the last couple of years. And so, yeah, that is the way the chapter ends. Like I said, that it is, and honestly, even in the early books, it's one of the few chapters that's that positive all the way through, pretty much. I mean, sure, there's mentions of Voldemort in here, and mentions of him getting in trouble with but it's like, it's all just in passing. Like, it's all just reminder, refresher, exposition-y type stuff. But anyway, we can't skip to chapter 2, or at least I'm not going to. We have to do this shit in order. And so, that is the conclusion. Let's see, let's have a look at the YouTube. Let's see if we got any. Oh, well, I mentioned this as a reply to a comment, I believe from Judy, about how it seemed like Justin Finch Fletchley disappeared after the Chamber of Secrets. And granted, it is just a mention, but it's mentioned that he's in the first DA meeting in Order of the Phoenix. So he's there. He hasn't completely disappeared. He just doesn't have a very active role. He doesn't get any speaking parts, I don't think, which is weird. I agree. And let's see, Jessica Min. Now, I don't know if this is it doesn't seem like she's 100% certain about this. I'll have to check this out. I should have looked it up before I recorded, but I was talking about how she doesn't necessarily specify any years in the book, even though it's sort of documented later in on Pottermore and in other places that we pretty much do know the timeline, and like everything can be given to a year that occurs in the novels. But apparently Min is saying that the final book takes place in the year of the first book, so that it can, as she quotes, open at the close, which is a clue on the golden snitch, and that Harry carries around with him in book 7. If that's true, that is quite brilliant, I must admit. Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, so we are rolling along. We are JK rolling along. Oh boy. And we're into this Prisoner of Azkaban thing when we've got the filler chapter out of the way. So tune in next time for chapter 2, also known as Aunt Marge's Big Mistake. Which is probably how Aunt Marge sounds when she laughs. Anyway, that is that. Enjoy the rest of your day part that you are in, and we will see you next time. Peace.